Three stories. The first one is the oldest written story we've got. More than 4,000 years old. Imprinted on a clay tablet, likely with a stylus made of reed. The story goes like this. Gilgamesh, the eponymous hero, is king of the city of Uruk. The first part of the story introduces us to a wild man, Enkidu, whom the gods have created to stop Gilgamesh from oppressing his people. Gilgamesh defeats Enkidu, and the two become great friends. They begin an adventure together, and the two companions anger the gods, and Enkidu is sentenced to death. In the second part of the story, Gilgamesh is in mourning and goes on a quest to find immortality. Gilgamesh turns his back on family and friends to wander the wilderness, searching for something he can never have. The story records his failure to find the immortality he was seeking. And the narrative closes with our hero never reaching his goal. Story number 2. Juan Ponce de Leon was a 16th century Spanish explorer and conquistador. He is famous for leading the first official European expedition to Florida and serving as the first governor of Puerto Rico. So yes, he is in fact the person responsible for Florida. I'm a native Floridian, so I can say that. But more interesting to us were his motives for his quest and exploration. As legend has it, Ponce de Leon discovered Florida while searching for the fountain of youth, an avenue towards immortality. While gold and colonization were most certainly motivating factors in his exploration, a quest for vitality restoring waters stands out as the defining force with which we still connect this leader of these missions. If you've ever spent time in Central or South Florida, I know you'll agree, it doesn't seem to me like he found the fountain of youth there. Ponce de Leon never finds what he's looking for. He never reaches his goal of immortality. Story 3. James Bedford was an American psychology professor at the University of California who wrote several books on occupational counseling. After suffering from kidney cancer that metastasized into his lungs, Bedford decided to face his mortality in a unique way. Upon his legal death in 1967, Bedford became the first person to be cryopreserved, that is, frozen in liquid nitrogen. Often seen by the medical community as pseudoscience and quackery, cryonics persists as a field of intrigue and fascination. Even though no one has ever been revived from such a frozen state, the cryonics community observes January 12th each year as James Bedford Day. Famously, the baseball player Ted Williams had his body frozen upon death. PayPal founder Peter Thiel and Seth MacFarlane, the creator of Family Guy, have announced their plans to do the same. Of course, none of these individuals have achieved their goal of immortality. The scientific community remains skeptical about there ever being a possibility that this plan could work. From the beginning of time and throughout human history, we have sought something unattainable. Human beings find themselves and continue to find themselves on a quest for immortality. Gilgamesh does not get there. Neither does Ponce de Leon. And the jury is still out on James Bedford. But things aren't looking so good. Even though no one has ever achieved immortality, human beings haven't stopped trying. More important than the particulars of the quests themselves and their unfortunate outcomes are the feelings and motivations which have pushed people towards these journeys. To understand all of this, we first need to consider what would make someone want to live forever. Once we understand these motivations, we can look at some of the challenges to this quest for immortality. Even though we must all face our mortality, I think there is still a way we can live forever. Let's start by understanding the motivations for this desire for immortality. In a way, this desire makes a lot of sense. Death brings about plenty of uncertainty and unknown. No one can tell us what will happen beyond this life. That means we're left to wonder and ponder about what might be in the world to come. Is there even a world to come? If so, what would my fate be? If not, then what happens to my soul, the body, to consciousness itself? These are some of the most fundamental questions we ask of humanity, and this, of course, is one of the topics that religions have taken upon themselves to solve, or at least to offer a response. Other religious traditions have their ideas. Sometimes there are concrete answers. More often the responses are mushy and ruminative, offering intentions and hopes rather than sureness that comes from the knowledge of absolute truth. Judaism, of course, has something to say about all of this. We're here inside the liturgy of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, asking ourselves fundamental questions of responsibility and atonement. We're doing our best to pay attention to the poetry and using this as a frame for understanding what might be possible not only in the year ahead, but for eternity. We don't know what happens when we die. So the impetus to do everything we can to preserve life, to try and live forever, well, that makes a lot of sense to me. Another reason we might want to live forever is to increase the amount of time we can make an impact on this world. Think about what humankind could achieve with endless time for discovery, exploration, and growth. We've gone to the moon and back with mere mortal lives shaping those projects and leading the way. Think of what might be possible if only time was not a constraining factor in our lives. We could address inequalities and work towards justice in the world. We could create and explore and still have time to relax on the beach. With endless time, there would be no more choices between today and tomorrow. There would be enough time for everything and everyone. And one of the significant challenges of our lives would simply disappear. But beyond fear of death and the desire for endless time, another reason people might want to live forever is that we know that life is good, beautiful, and sweet. We know what it feels like to hug a friend after a long absence. We know how delightful it is to celebrate accomplishments together. We know how good it feels to fill a room like this one with music and movement and ideas. We know plenty about what it means to be alive. So it makes a lot of sense that we would want to preserve this sweetness. Who would wish for all of this to be over. Of course, we know that sometimes life is painful and harsh. We know that we hurt each other and make mistakes, yet the potential for good to outweigh the bad tempts us to think optimistically about what it might mean to live forever. The Torah has another idea about all of this and asks us to consider the meaning of our own mortality. From Abraham to Sarah to Moses and Miriam, no one we encounter in the Torah is built to live forever. Unlike the stories found in other cultures and mythologies, the Torah goes to great lengths to demonstrate the fallibility and humanity of even our greatest ancestors. Abraham is compromised in his dealings with Hagar and Ishmael. He casts out one child in favor of another, and on his deathbed wills his possessions to his favored son Isaac. Oh yeah, that privileged son Isaac, he's the one who Abraham almost sacrifices on top of a mountain. Moses hits the rock. For all his strengths, Moses shows plenty of weakness and plenty of need for growth in his leadership of the people Israel on their journey to the promised land. Moses is allowed to look but not enter. Why? Because of his mistakes, because of his fallibility, because of his own imperfectness, because of his own mortality. His time concludes outside the promised land, and it's a possession the Israelites can only take as their own after the story of Moses is finished. No one in the Bible lives forever. Mortality is a fact that all of humanity must come to understand. And the Torah sees mortality as part of this journey of being alive. The rabbis of the Talmud are a bit looser when it comes to rigid categories and imagine a world where immortality and time travel are occasionally possible. Yet that time travel is really only meaningful in its storytelling ability as it teaches a lesson. And of course, immortality as it's dreamt of in the mind of the rabbis is not spoken of with any certainty. One example is an imagined story of Moses teleporting through time. As the story goes, at the time of the burning bush, Moses sees the writing of the Torah scroll and notices crowns sitting atop the letters. Looking unfamiliar to him, he asks God, "What are all those little crowns about?" God answers by quantum leaping him forward several thousand years, and Moses finds himself suddenly sitting in the back of Rabbi Akiva's study hall, where he observes a debate unfolding. They're debating a law, and Moses is confused about what's being discussed. Things seem unfamiliar to him. The student asks the teacher about the law. "How do we know we're supposed to be doing this way?" says the student to the teacher. "Where does it come from?" Rabbi Akiva, the teacher, responds, "It was given to us by Moses at Mount Sinai, and he passed it down in the oral tradition. It's our job to learn and expand it." At that moment, the Talmud tells us, Moses' mind was put at ease as he recognized that the Torah itself evolved beyond his moment. While Moses doesn't live forever, what has eternity in our tradition is Torah. And notably, Torah can adapt and evolve over time, making it the thing that lasts forever. Just like Torah lives forever, I think there is a way we too can live forever. I see the adaptability and evolution of humanity in rituals we Jews use to remember our dead. Yizkor and Yortzeit. These observances are a way of keeping memory alive and allowing ourselves and others to live forever. In a few moments, we're going to be chanting Yizkor, the memorial service. It's a service that's only conducted 4 times a year. It allows us to stand individually and recall the lives of those who shaped and touched our own lives. I have a feeling none of us will be saying Yizkor for Moses or Abraham or Gilgamesh or Ponce de Leon or James Bedford. Rather, we'll recite these words for people with whom we've had a personal relationship. As we do so, our memories are keeping these people alive. Because these people were meaningful to us, and because we hold their memories in our hearts, they do indeed live on not only in our minds, but in our actions and in our commitments. There's another way we accomplish this same task of memory and immortality. It's the practice of Yortzeit, meaning year time in Yiddish German. The practice is so prevalent in Jewish communities that even Sephardic communities use this clearly Ashkenazic term Yortzeit to refer to the custom. The practice invites us to pause on the date of death of a loved one and remember them at that exact time of the year. If someone you knew happened to die the day before Yom Kippur, then each year, the day before Yom Kippur, we pause to remember them. We light a Yortzeit candle, take intentional time to participate in actions that cultivate their memory. For some, this means we cook a dish for dinner that our grandmother would have loved. Others write a letter to a spouse they are remembering. And some visit the cemetery and leave a stone at the grave. These are just some of the ways we incorporate the memory of those we recall. It marks that date with significance and meaning. One of the ways the Torah and our tradition understands time is as a helix that spirals forward. And in that way, the importance of the date of death really matters. It invites us to recall the moment we found ourselves in when we experienced that loss, and at the very least, remember the circumstance of their passing. More than that, when we take the practice of Yortzeit seriously, we find ourselves with the opportunity to prompt reflection and memory. For those whom we know well, we can be flooded with stories and moments that we recall. From meals we shared in our childhood homes to experiences we had navigating life's challenging circumstances. With those closest to us, we may have a wellspring of memories to draw from. But of course, there are others in our lives whom we knew less well or whom we never knew at all. Think about your great-grandmother that your mother always spoke of, an ancestor, a founder, those who came before us. Their lives, too, can live on through Yortzeit. Even if you never knew someone personally, by reciting their name each year on their date of death, you can keep them alive. I know this is true because I stand in this room regularly, week after week, and read the names off the synagogue's Yortzeit list. I've been reading this list regularly since I arrived in Tulsa. And at this point, I know a lot about the people who have come before me. I read the names of the people who built this congregation and the people who celebrated their weddings on this bima, the people who baked in our kitchens and who sat comfortably in the same chairs you now occupy. Of course, some of what I've learned are facts and tidbits I've picked up along the way. But the Yortzeit list provides context and prompts that help me better understand this community. I know whose parents died on the same day, and I know who has no one in the congregation left to remember them. I know who carries the name of their ancestors, and I have a sense of whose deaths were tragic and sudden. All of this I can derive from the context of reading a series of names annually, visiting and revisiting these lists over and over again. For me, a name on a Yortzeit list will live forever. While immortality might not be possible for any of us, I think the practice of Yizkor and Yortzeit give us the chance to live forever. For some I know what I'm saying is tried and true. These practices are part of the regular rhythms of your life. But I have a feeling that for at least some of you, what I am now describing is new, less familiar, or something you recall from a practice long ago. I want everyone to know that the synagogue is here to help. One of the essential tasks of institutions like ours is the task of helping you to aid in your memory. We host Yizkor services 4 times a year at the appointed time the tradition sets forth. Of course, today, Yom Kippur, and Shemini Atzeret, Passover, and Shavuot. And every week, we gather at least twice for services where we read the names of our loved ones who have passed in that period. Lights on our memorial board are lit according to the same schedule. And many of you receive annual letters reminding you of upcoming observances. As a result of databases and online calendars, it has never been easier to track the complexities of the Hebrew calendar. And we want you to see the synagogue as your first resource for memory. To that end, if there is a Yortzeit you'd like to add to the synagogue's memorial list, or if you'd like to update your records, I want you to know we're here to help. We've set up a page on our website, tulsagog.com/remember, for you to submit this information. Or you can call Shauna at the front desk and ensure that we have the names and dates you'd like us to record. We're here to help you remember others. And along those lines, we're here to remember each other. Because if there's one thing I know to be true about what it means to be involved in synagogue life, it's that we develop relationships with one another, and we can carry those memories forward even long after we're gone. I feel the absence of those who were with us a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the last time we gathered in this sanctuary. I remember the warmth of those who shaped my experiences in this community who are no longer with us. In that way, too, we can all live forever. To return to the 3 stories that framed out the beginning of our time speaking this morning, Gilgamesh never reaches immortality, but the story is preserved in an epic poem about his life. Ponce de Leon never finds the fountain of youth, but his adventures inspire settlement and discovery in a new way. James Bedford has not yet defrosted and come back to life, but his Yortzeit is observed yearly by those who see him as an inspiration and pioneer. In that way, all 3 of these people have found a way to achieve their goal. They may not be walking and breathing among us, but they will live forever. We do not have to be these individuals to do the same. Through the practices of memory laid out by our tradition, we connect ourselves to those who came before us, and try to build a life that is similarly worthy of remembrance. On this Day of Atonement, on this Yom Kippur, may we be the ones who recall each other. May we commit and recommit ourselves to the essential practices of memory. And though we must all face our mortality, may we consider keenly what it means to live forever. So may we be blessed. Let us all say, Amen, Amen.